Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Oswego Alumni Podcast. The views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the guest and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Oswego Alumni Association, SUNY Oswego, or any of its officials. Email us with guest ideas or any other feedback at alumni@oswego.edu.
Welcome to the Oswego Alumni Podcast. I'm your host, Dee Perkins. We are sitting in the studios of WTOP on the Oswego campus, and we are so thrilled to welcome Dr. Peter and Andrea Bocko. They are visiting the campus, and it's because they've done an amazing thing by giving the campus a wonderful gift. But their origin story is so fantastic. They met in a chemistry class in 1973 and fell in love. And I hear it had something to do with noxious gases. Mm-hmm. So to start with the love story, should we ask Andrea to tell it first?
What you were working on for your master's thesis?
It was pyridine, and we had one hood in the lab, and so I had to produce one starter material, and it really kind of stunk up the whole lab.
And I remember it was like a bucket full. It wasn't just a little bit in a flask, so There was a lot of stinky pyridine.
Yeah, I was a grad student, and Peter was working on research as a senior.
I was an undergraduate scholar.
So the smelliness drew you to her.
Well, I've always had a thing for a girl in a lab coat, but that's part of it too. But the synthesis that Andrea was doing was a little hazardous because of the fumes and everything. So our professor, Professor Hyde, who was the guy who gave me the undergraduate research scholarship, was the one who put us together in the laboratory just so we could keep an eye on each other, okay? And we did, So.
Very, very much so.
Yeah, that's right.
Your family is filled with Oswego grads. Did they all follow you into the science field?
No. My dad was what used to be called industrial arts, and he was a printing teacher. He actually grew up in Oswego, worked in a print shop, and then ended up teaching printing, which is like a dead craft these days with offset and the internet and so on. And then my brother, Dave, was a year ahead of me, and he was also a industrial arts, which is now technology major as well, and he taught for 40 years. So both my parents were teachers, and my brother was a teacher. And of course, Andrea had 25 years of teaching chemistry. So I was the oddball with the science rather than the technology side.
But did you feel the family was like, we are green and gold, we bleed green and gold, you should go to Oswego?
I think so. We used to come up here, quite a bit. My dad, of course, he graduated in 1948, so he didn't have any strong alumni connections to it. So he wasn't active like Andrea and I have tried to do. But Oswego, as we said earlier, always kind of felt like home because we would be visiting family up here when I was a little tiny kid, bored spitless, listening to my aunts and uncles talk. And then when I went older, it was kind of a natural thing to choose Oswego for school. I don't know how you chose Oswego.
I think we had for my high school in Rome. I think I belonged to the Spanish club and the teachers club, and I think we had a couple of trips up here to field trips. So I did. Actually, 30 of us out of our class decided to come here. So when I did come here, it also felt like I knew some of my friends that also came, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a teacher yet. I was, but I did want to do chemistry because chemistry was my favorite subject in high school, and I just loved it. So I knew I was going to do that, but I didn't know that I was going to be doing teaching until towards the end. So
you can imagine what it was like at the time. I mean, this is the late '60s, early '70s. I mean, some professors and teachers were hostile to the idea of a woman going into the sciences. So I'm sure.
Yeah, my physics teacher said I should do kindergarten. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Or elementary. I
Wow.
said, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do chemistry or physics, which I did a little bit of each.
So fast forward, leaving Oswego, you guys get married, and you're looking for a job, and you find a home where?
Well, I went to grad school at Cornell, And during that time, Andrea taught. So Andrea
Yeah.
put me through grad school, and she already had her master's degree.
With my teaching degree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I had the graduate salary of I think $2,500 at Cornell.
Wow.
But I got a degree. So this was the late 70s, which was not a good time for employment, and so we looked all over the place. And we've got very strong family connections, so we really wanted it to be in New York State. I had job offers outside, but it just didn't feel right for me. And so I sent a cold letter to Corning Incorporated, and they showed some interest and brought me down and did an interview, and we ended up there, and we moved to Painted Post, New York, and essentially lived there for the last from 1979 till now. So yeah.
I love the story you tell about Corning, that the people there felt humble, and you loved that about them.
Yes, I know. You know, when I was going around and interviewing, it was interesting that I felt like this little pretension. Like we went down to Western Electric, which is one of the big opto engineering equipment companies on that, and they didn't even admit to watching television, because it's a little pretentious,
Yes.
And I like television. And so when I met some of the people at Corning, everybody was really down to earth, and so just felt like a place that we could make a home.
Yes, and good. And with time, after I had my children, I taught in the school system for about 22, 23 years. Yeah.
In your role at Corning, you spent a lot of time in Asia.
That's right.
Did you wind up living there, or did the kids stay here?
By the time we went to Asia, we went together. Both my sons had finished college and had jobs, so I felt very comfortable about leaving, and we lived there for about 4.5 years.
What would we be surprised about living in Japan? Was it Japan? Yeah.
Yep.
What would we be surprised that you learned about living in Japan that we wouldn't know?
That the woman that you make friends with are like lifelong friends. And I got involved with an after-school program. It was children of parents that lived abroad with their child, and they were usually like from about kindergarten to about 5th grade, because after 5th grade they have to take all these tests to get into schools. And they were, I was like their science guru, because they really don't have, I managed to get into a junior high classroom just to see what it was like. They don't have as much hands-on as we do. And
The teacher just talks.
And the kids go to sleep. No, I guess this was something that I did. I just took little labs that I did, like making ice cream and goop and things that they were like putting together molecules, and they just loved it. And of course the kids are very enthusiastic, and the Japanese woman, I'm really serious. They take your friendship really seriously. And like if I said, where am I going to get the ice? Where am I going to get the, whatever I needed? They would help. Oh, don't worry, meet me in this corner and we'll find it. Yeah.
You're still friends to this day?
Oh yeah. When I went back one time, they had a little luncheon for me, and yeah. Oh, yeah.
So
I wanted to tell a story about Andrea's science projects. Okay.
Oh.
So for starting in the late 80s, I was traveling back and forth to Japan. At the peak, about every month, and it actually was like maybe two weeks in Asia and then 3 weeks home. So I was going back and forth all the time. And I said, well, if we move there, it won't be so bad. But it turned out, because you have to feed the beast, the headquarters, and keep the top guys happy, I was doing the same amount of travel except going the opposite way. And so Andrea would always ask me to bring supplies so she could do these projects. So one time she wanted to have him to make these little molecules. And so what she needed was modeling clay and
cleaners.
and wire. Well, was it pipe? No, it was also wire.
Oh yeah, yes, for
Okay,
wire, yeah.
so just imagine I'm going through security and I've got a suitcase filled with bricks of clay, which looks a lot like plastic explosives,
Yes.
and coils of wire. You can imagine the concern
Yeah.
that might have caused, briefly, until I actually showed them. It was just clay.
Well,
yeah.
I'll just run my fingers through it.
Yeah.
In the meantime, she's teaching. You become, I'm not exactly sure where this is in your timeline, but
Yeah.
you become something of a YouTube star. And I want to reference this because I really want to get it right. A Day Made of Glass, 27 million views. And it's a video from about 10 years ago. And it's
Right.
a futuristic look at what glass can do.
That's right.
Tell me a little bit about working on that.
Well, I called myself a dime store visionary at Corning because for a long time I was working on a project of flat glass for LCD screens, and it was taking like not only the back seat, we were in the trunk, compared to the big products of like optical fiber and things like that. When I was always a champion, and I was always trying to explain, in order to get funding so I could do all these projects that I wanted to do and the interactions with customers and new product developments and stuff, I always was trying to create this vision that someday there will be interactive screens everywhere. And so I worked with the communications group about how we might communicate this, and we came up with the idea of doing this video that was The Day Made of Glass. And I was not in the YouTube. I was a science advisor. We got professional actors to do the thing, and we worked with this small production company on the West Coast who did a marvelous job with the special effects. And it's interesting, it's 10 years old, but a lot of the things like these totally interactive screens and how we shop and so on has come to pass. And so, I was, for one short, brief period of time, considered to be quite a visionary. But
So you took the words
long ago,
right
yeah.
out of my mouth, because I was going to ask you, of all the things that are on that video, what is the thing that you're disappointed we don't have? And can I jump in and tell you one Syracuse-based story that you'll love?
Yeah.
One of the things they showed is a screen above a highway that showed there's an accident ahead and it's a 4 to 5 minute delay.
Yeah.
In Syracuse, there's a famous bridge on the Lake Parkway, and trucks hit that bridge at least once a week, maybe twice a month.
Yeah.
And it's because it's lower because of the train that goes over it. It's lower than the average. And we have signs, we have flashing signs, and nothing seems to get anyone's attention about this bridge. Your screen would get someone's attention.
So
that's
true.
the thing I wish we had.
Yeah. Well, instead of answering your question the way you asked it, if I don't mind, I'm going to twist it around a little bit. What I felt was a little lacking in the first Day Made of Glass was the fact it was like too much focused on consumerism, and kind of like the trivial things of finding directions and things like that. And when we were doing planning for the second one, I set the direction by saying that we have to show how it improves the human condition, not just person-to-person contact, but the human condition. So the themes of education as well as medicine, were very key. So that was what I thought was missing in the first one that we got in the second one. But I'm not sure how many views the second one has, but not just a fraction of the ones that
you
that
don't
were
want
on the
me to
first
say.
one.
It's not as good. But I thought the second one was appropriate in that we talked earlier about you haven't really accomplished that goal of having screens everywhere. One of the things you talked about in a speech you did that's online on YouTube, we'll put it in the show notes, is that this phone, watched and phone relationship is very one-to-one, and it's almost isolating.
Right.
Whereas the vision that you had for the future is very not isolating. You're standing in a bus depot and you can say, oh, look, the bus is 10 minutes away. That is me, the three of us could all look at that screen and have an experience. Whereas if I'm looking at my phone, I'm pretty much tuned you guys out. And,
That's right.
And
Yeah.
that is disappointing.
Yeah. So I think in general I've been a little disappointed in the overall my hopes for the information age, because as we were saying earlier, it really is, screens are just supposed to facilitate the human connection and not necessarily make it about the information. And it's turned out that this ubiquitous displays and ubiquitous information is turning out to be dominated by, force feeding us marketing messages, watching us as much as we're watching the world, and being somewhat isolating, as we said. So I like your optimism. You feel that there's still time.
There is still time.
And we'll get there. We'll get there someday.
In the speech that I saw, it was the display expo.
It was a digital signage expo.
I think, and you said it in your speech, that they are forward thinking and they are constantly, have you been to Vegas? They're constantly thinking of ways to use displays better. And so I think if we continue to hope for the future, there is hope there. One of the other things you mentioned in 2013 was, I want to get this right, antimicrobial on the screens, and making sure that all of them, in a world where we've just come out of a pandemic, I thought that was very forward thinking, that people weren't really thinking about germs on their screens.
Well, it's interesting that turns out to be a very, very difficult problem. Corning, after I left, developed products of surface treatments that do, and it's really easy actually how to do that. You just need to have copper, or this is for the chemists, copper or silver ions available at the surface, and that will kill just about any bacteria, and it will inoculate the viruses. The problem is that the surface always has to be wet in order to have the ion exchange to bring those ions to the surface. So, it works great so long as there's somebody there spritzing it with Windex once in a while to keep it moist.
And they don't like you to do that. They don't like you actually wetting down your devices.
They don't. But I understand that the product's been a success, and it has maybe a very small part help with the pandemic. Another thing that Corning did was to the vials for the vaccine. There was a problem with that the glass that they were using in these vials, number one, it wasn't very strong, and there's like little chips of glass. And so imagine being injected and actually injecting little bits of glass in your arm along with the vaccine. And Corning figured out how to solve that, and so a lot of those vaccines were delivered inside Corning vials.
Wow.
And the challenge is not just the chemistry and figuring out what's the problem and how to solve it on the basis of material science. It's also how do you mass produce it at a level that it's cheap enough and plentiful enough that it actually has an impact when you're delivering billions of these doses.
When you retired, you moved on to teaching. Did you ask Andrea for help on how to engage with students?
Yeah, I think you did.
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
What advice did you give him?
I don't remember at the time exactly, but.
Or what advice?
Don't be a jerk, maybe.
What advice would you give anyone?
Just to be consistent and get involved with the kids one-to-one, which I think happened. They're interested in their careers.
Yeah. The other thing is, one time I was at your, you were giving an introduction to parents.
Right.
About, this is like an open house, and so I'm in the back watching my wife talk, and I never got a chance to watch her in a professional. But she stood up there and just calmly and slowly and crystal clear, every word meant something. And I just said, I was really proud of the fact that, to be a good teacher, you really need to be an extraordinary communicator.
Wow.
In college, that is the I'm sure Oswego's great. At Cornell, not so much. And so, I taught a elective course, and it was for seniors and graduate students. And I peaked out with 50 students, which is unheard of, just because, number one, I was able to tell stories from my career, and so I was able to link the subject matter to actual experience on that. And also, I was more engaging with them, and I wasn't just mumbling to myself, writing, on the whiteboard behind. I was actually engaging, and it struck some. It was well received by students, or at least for a while. But the pandemic kind of took a lot of the fun out of that.
And you stopped teaching at that point?
Well, I had planned. I had done it for 5 years in person. And the thing about teaching, you have to understand, the Ivies are not like Oswego. All right, this is an Ivy League, and if you don't, you can always take this out. But I think the Ivies have gone barking mad, and this. I just saw even in the 6 years that I was teaching, the attitude of the students became much more negative than it was. And the attitude of the professors is like, this is not so important, the teaching part. And I took some training the summer before I taught, the fall of 2020, the last time I taught the course, and that was for to be done online. And so I took training during the summer given by, they've got a Center of Teaching Excellence, which does very good work. And we were able to interact and share with professors, other professors and stuff like that. The interesting thing is that every single professor that took the course with that was an adjunct.
Oh.
There wasn't a single tenured professor. So to me, that just talks about the level of priority that teaching to students has as an Ivy compared to a place like Oswego, where it is central to the mission. So I don't want to be too negative, but this is one of the reasons that I've been so supportive, as much as we could be, to Oswego and their mission, and the key experiences that Andrea and I had that were so seminal in our wonderful lives together.
We both have something in common in that I think we felt being here, there is a humility to everyone. And I learned, just jump in and try it. There's an openness for, if you want to go after something, go after something. We're welcoming that. Mm-hmm. And that is the reason why I continue to come back. And
Mm-hmm.
you talked in the beginning of our conversation about the humility you felt at Corning.
Yeah,
and
it was very similar to that.
Yeah. It's a similar feeling here that,
Yeah.
there is a humility that no one is above anyone else.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people who are above. But
I call it upstate New York values,
Yes. Yes.
We're not big city,
Not puffing ourselves
not
up.
puffing ourselves off, we're not, going to Soul Cycle and, and what is it, Whole Foods?
Yeah,
is the
Whole
one.
Foods. Yeah, call it whole paycheck.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we've got a son who lives, the son and daughter-in-law and granddaughter lives in Brooklyn.
Be careful
it's
there
completely
now.
different.
Oh, yeah. My
Yeah.
mom lived in Queens. I grew up in Queens. And whenever I go back, I always long for green.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody show me some green, because, it's all buildings and metal. And
Yeah.
you don't realize how much you thrive on
Yeah.
the greenery until
Yeah.
you're taken out of that position.
Yeah.
And then you're like, where are my trees?
Yeah. So at one point I want to make about our philanthropic support.
I was going to ask that next.
Yes, to the summer research. Andrea and I actually met not in the class, but doing the summer research,
during the
as I
lab,
explained.
yeah.
So it was
Okay.
during the summer research experience. And I had a supported position, so I didn't have to work on the roads or, cleaning dishes in
Waiting
in a greasy
tables.
spoon or something like
Right.
that. I was able to do research on that. And that experience was so important for my career that we just wanted to, pass it on to this is not the next generation. This is the generation after the next generation. So this is why our focus is. Number one, it got me into Cornell. I mean, when I was here, I wasn't that great a student. I mean, I had the potential, but I also had a lot of fun. And so I was distracted. I always pull it out at the end of the semester, but to get into Cornell chemistry, which was the top 5 in the country at that time, I didn't stand out at all, except for the fact that the research I did with Professor Hyde, I had 5 publications.
Wow.
And that's amazing. And so when professors are considering bringing somebody into a graduate program, you're going to say, they're thinking to themselves, I can exploit this guy, or this woman on that. So it just proved that I could actually get something done. And also, once I started my graduate research, I already had the skills of the little things that can hold you up for hours or maybe even a week of equipment breaking or something like that. When you're in a laboratory, you get great lab skills, a laboratory course, but you're just trying to reproduce a solution. And my brother Mark, who was a professor, still is a professor at University of Rochester, told me very early in his career, I think he was just appointed an assistant professor. He said, Pete, the most difficult thing about being an adult is not knowing what to do next. And so when you're doing your own research, like in a summer program, and you have a little bit of independence, you know what the assignment is, but nobody there's no book to look up, this is the next step. There's nobody looking over your shoulder to say, this is what you should do next as well. So it just kind of teaches you to be a resourceful, resilient scientist by doing this summer research very earlier than somebody who does not have the undergraduate research experience.
So we're going to give you two a break and talk to a couple of the students who are benefiting from your gift. And then we're going to have you come back because there's a couple of last questions. One of the things I want to ask you about that you can think about right now is you guys have been married a long time. You're making it work. What advice would you give to other people who are trying to have a long-term relationship? But hold that thought. We're going to bring in the students right now. And through the magic of TV, we are back, and with us are four amazing students who are all taking part in the Bockos' wonderful gift to the chemistry department. So I will have you just kind of go around and introduce yourself. Ladies first.
Of course. My name's Joanna. I'm a biochemistry major here.
Biochemistry, that's great.
My name is Devin. I am also a biochem major.
My name's Owen. I'm a chemistry major.
My name's Matt. I'm a chemistry major as well.
So tell me how the gift made a difference in your life in terms of going forward in biochemistry.
Wow. So actually last year I was taking organic chemistry with Dr. Damkashi, and he was like, you should get involved in research, and I ended up getting involved with Dr. Neary, and I didn't really know how beneficial summer research would be until now. I've started my fall classes and everything, and working in the lab and doing things. I'm just more efficient, and having all that hands-on experience and being able to learn outside of a classroom has definitely been extremely beneficial to me and this fall in my classes that I'm working on now.
Were you all together in the same summer research lab?
No, actually, I think we're all four from different labs.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay. And your name is?
My name is Devin.
Hi, Devin. And so you're also taking part in summer research, and the grant helped make that happen for you. I'm going to guess if it wasn't for that, you probably would have been waiting tables?
Yeah, it was really wonderful because I didn't have to do that part-time work, so I was able to come in every single time I wanted to in the lab, because ours had a lot of, you weren't supposed to stay there for a particular time, but we wanted to make sure we got everything done. We got a huge 1,000 samples in over the summer, and being able to go in and not worry about how much time was being put into that was huge, and let me really focus on getting some good work done and hopefully getting that good data to people who can use it.
Are you allowed to say what the project was?
Absolutely. It was mother-daughter pairs, and we were studying cortisol, so it was an NYU study for those mother-daughter pairs, and we did cortisol, which is, you can essentially chemically study stress. Mm-hmm. So we were able to get that data because they gave us some hair and some nails, and we went through all those 1,000 samples, and we sent that all back to them. So hopefully that will be useful to them.
It sounds like it could be mind-numbing work, and yet when you know it's going for a really good reason, I bet there's a part of you that it drives you on.
There's a really interesting thing with that, where it's something about doing something so monotonous, but knowing you're generating data for something is nice, because you're like, this is useful. Like my more experienced counterparts who were teaching me were doing some stuff that was really difficult and really technically demanding. And I knew that since I was doing this and labeling things and weighing things and making everything set up for them, that they wouldn't have to spend their time doing that, and they can really hopefully get our data even better and get our error even lower. And it feels really good to be able to actually contribute towards that.
I missed the opportunity to ask you about the work that you were doing this summer. What was your project?
So Dr. Neary has been working on a sumac project for the last several years, and our goal this summer was to optimize our methods for extracting the phenolic compounds from the sumac trees. So we are actually partnered with ESF, and I'm continuing this research this fall. And so we actually just had our Zoom meeting today talking about everything that's being set up. So we had a huge success. We were able to cut down our extraction time from like 4 days to like 5 hours. So it was very successful. We were able to get rid of a lot of errors that were happening. So I'm really excited to work into this fall and really get consistent data and really look at the project in a whole, because I just joined this summer. But also, like what Devin was saying, it's really nice, like, you know, when you're working in the lab, you don't always like see it. It's just you're doing the same thing over and over. But when you see those results and you do your presentations and you're able to talk about it and show it, it's really gives you a sense of, I don't know, accomplishment after like seeing all your results and everything.
Owen.
Yes.
Owen is next. Owen, tell us about the research you got involved in.
So this summer, my research advisor and 2 other group members of mine were looking at the process of synthesizing amides, which are precursors to commercial plastics and detergents. And we saw that the process was really it took a lot of temperature and pressure to get it done, and it used a lot of acids and bases. And we wanted to make it a more environmentally friendly process. So to do that, we looked at some catalysts that are used in amide hydration at the moment, and we discovered that one of the best ones was a water-soluble catalyst, and another one was a 6-coordinate catalyst instead of a 4-coordinate tertiary structure catalyst. So we put the best parts of those 2 catalysts together, and we made our own procedure to create this catalyst. And then at the end, we were able to actually use it in the hydration to create the amides, and it did work, but not as well as we had hoped. So in future research, we're going to have to discover different phosphine ligands we want to use to create the catalyst.
And you were paid to do this research.
Yes.
Did you have to kind of go to your parents and say, I can either come home and work at Friendly's, or I can do this research, which is really going to help me later on in life?
Yeah, usually in the summers I'm working construction with my brother, doing masonry work, pouring concrete, so this was a great turn of the tide.
I can only, I'm giggling a little bit here. I can only imagine you going over to the masonry guys and telling them the thing that you just told me about your research project.
I don't want to hear any of it.
Yeah, no.
They tell me to speak English.
Yeah, they're like barely holding on, barely. The last person we have is our resident senior. Tell us about, I'm sorry, your name is?
Matt.
Matt, thanks Matt. Tell us about your research project.
So this summer I had the pleasure of joining Dr. Haddadi in the lab. And so I'm a chemistry major, and I also have a minor in forensic science. So that's why I chose to join Dr. Haddadi. And our project was basically a forensics project because she's the forensics chairperson. So we were looking at the different amino acid concentrations in latent fingerprints between male and female subjects. So the purpose of our experiment was to determine if there's a significant difference in the concentration, the different concentrations of amino acids in male to female. Because typically when you think of fingerprints, you think of like a forensic show and they're dusting for prints and stuff. But the latent fingerprints, where they might show up, they're not always, you can't always connect it back to the databases they have. So it's been found in other research projects that you can take the sweat and oils that contain amino acids from those prints and run different experiments on them, which is what we did over summer. And then you can, like we use statistics on it as well to determine what kind of difference there was between those. So pretty much the whole summer we were just running the method of swabbing the fingerprints and running our tests on them and then putting them through GCMS, which is what we use to get the data. And then at the end of the summer, we took the previous data from the people that were doing this project in the spring, and we ran all that data through our statistical analysis, which is what we got for our data at the end, which is, because we were kind of like, over the summer we were doing phase 2, but they never really finished their phase 1 of the project, so we had to kind of go back and clean up what they didn't do. And so our results, we didn't get the best results that we wanted, so we're hoping that in the future, this fall and in the spring, we can run back more samples with more, we want more, just more samples as well to get a more, like a bigger data pool, which we hope will increase the actual difference. And we're also only looking at 3 specific amino acids. Like we found at least 11, but in the statistics that we ran, we only ran the difference of 3 of them. So we're hoping that if we increase that, we should get better results as well.
And did you find that having the ability to kind of go home to your parents and say, I'm getting paid this summer, made all the difference, as opposed to taking a job with this guy on construction site?
So I've actually been doing research since my freshman year, but then I started my second semester freshman year, but then COVID hit, so I wasn't able to do it over the summer, and then I wasn't able to do it my sophomore year over the summer as well, because all the professors had to do research with the seniors that couldn't do it during COVID, so I didn't have a spot. But then in last summer, not this past summer, but my junior year, I also did summer research, and then this past year as well. And it's definitely, like, I used to be a lifeguard over the summer, so it's a lot more fun to be in the lab and do what I'm gonna do for my career versus just sitting out in the sun where no one comes to visit. So I definitely enjoy being in the lab a lot more, and working on a forensics project now when I want to go into a forensics lab in the future I think is very beneficial to me.
I think some of the people on the panel here are saying they would really like to sit on the beach where no one goes and enjoy the sunshine, but I appreciate what you're trying to do. Sitting here talking to you guys as an older alum, class of '85, I am so struck by how intelligent, committed, and energetic you are about your chosen fields. Do you ever hear, and maybe it's in the media, that kids today are lazy and not smart and not interested in the famous no one wants to work? And if you do hear that, what would you like to say?
I think a big thing with it is I honestly almost do agree with that at some points, because a lot of people I talk to, it's just like, oh yeah, there's homework tomorrow, and it's like, yeah, I haven't started it yet. But when you really give people something that they want to do, and not just something they want to do, but something they can impact, like over the summer, I was encouraged a lot by my mentor there with Dr. Kestis to not only do all this stuff and do that grunt work like I mentioned, which I appreciated doing, but also to actively try to change the procedure. And like she said, like she got to, how much shorter did you make that process? Like days, right?
Days, 5 days.
And that's so much more wonderful, instead of being like, here's your assignment, here's your grade, move on to the next thing. It's like, you did this. In the future, we're going to use this procedure, and we've made it better. I made it so like we can make ours a lot less expensive. Than what we used to do is we used to use like certain types of compressed air that we thought we needed to use, but I was able to test and find we didn't. So that like can almost half the cost for certain parts of it. And that's awesome, and that's such a great feeling that I think maybe we just don't get as much. I don't know why earlier on, but being told like, you did a good job, we can use this, you might get your name on a paper somewhere, is insane motivation that you really don't get when you're just told, just write this down and you get a grade, and then you move on and you do the next thing, which can be really soul-crushing eventually.
He had his hand up first.
Yeah, I agree with what Devin was saying, because I thought of myself like that at one point, and I didn't really think I would be doing summer research, but I gave it a shot last summer, and I found out that I learned so many skills that I'm gonna need for my career, and it was just such an enjoyable experience, and I learned so much, so it was all around great.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to agree with Devin. I feel like that saying has kind of come about because there are a lot of kids like that, but it's because I feel like they haven't found what they're passionate about. And it's very easy to be efficient and do a good job in something that you love. And ultimately, if you can find your passion and you can work on that and get your connections, then I think, I mean, it's easy for us to look like we're doing a good job, but we're all just going day to day. So
We're all just going day to day, my friends.
So, but I agree with Devin. Just if you can find what you're passionate about and put your work into that. But unfortunately, there's a lot of stuff that you have to do in life that you don't want to do. So later in life, you can do what you do want to do.
Matt, do you have science friends? Like we just talked about, there are some kids out there who are like, homework is tomorrow, whatever. Do you have friends in this department, especially in the area that you're in? I know with all the CSI shows, there are certainly probably a lot of students who are interested in your area. Have you formed friendships with them?
I have a lot of friends in the chemistry department. I haven't met too many people that have forensics minors like myself, but I think like even just the chemistry friends, like those bonds that I've made are really helpful. Like we can help each other with homeworks, like it's more people to bounce ideas off of, and you have all your classes with these people, so it's nice to get to know them more. But to piggyback off of what she was saying about like finding your passion and stuff, when I was never like the best student in high school, but when I got to my junior year and I went to my chemistry class for the first time, I like absolutely fell in love with it, and I had a really great teacher, which I think definitely helped, because I think that can make all the difference in a lot of classes, is not having a good teacher who doesn't care about it, is just lecturing and teaching what they have to, but like someone that actually cares about it. It really impacted me, and I've loved chemistry ever since. It's been what, 5 to like 6 years, I think, and I've loved it ever since then. So find your passion and keep going with that.
Is there anything that you would want to say to Peter and Andrea? They're here today and they help fund your summer research program. Is there anything that you would want to say to them?
Yeah, definitely thank you. I mean, I was able to learn so much, and then also not have to worry about the financial side of being in Oswego and staying here this summer. I actually received 2 scholarships, one for housing and food and one for the research, so I can't thank them enough for that. I was able to learn and grow and do all these things that are now growing in my resume. You know, it's getting nice and long. I appreciate that and all of that, so thank you.
Yeah, they gave us the ability to come here this summer and work and get paid, actually, instead of just getting a credit, which is amazing. And I just got an apartment, so I needed rent money, and that was amazing to live here over the summer. And it was a great experience, and I can't say thank you enough.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that, where it is, like I said earlier, I used to work just in my hometown at a place called Ingalls. While that was fine, it is so much nicer to not have to stress every time you're finishing your work at the lab and be like, oh, I need to immediately go jump over to another shift, which leaves you exhausted. So yeah, I really can't thank them enough for giving that peace of mind to, like we were saying earlier, really chase a passion that we've found, because a lot of people don't have the capacity to do that. So that's just wonderful.
Thank you guys so much for coming down. I really appreciate it. And I'm also in awe of you all. Science wasn't my thing, and to just hear how excited you are, it gets me very teary-eyed and very excited for the future. So thanks again. We're going to bring the Bockos back on, and you guys can go back to classes.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
You.
And we're back. And you must feel so amazingly good hearing those stories from those students.
Kind of made me choke up a little bit, because,
Me too.
I mean, everybody should support their alma mater.
Yes.
And but the opportunity to support directly a human being to accomplish their goals and to get through the little barriers that everybody has in order to get a rewarding college education, and at the same time support those experiences that we had at Oswego that were formative for us too. It's just a win-win. So it almost feels selfish listening to these students, their gratitude, which I think maybe is a little exaggerated, but it is very humbling to hear that. So,
Andrea, is this a little tip of the hat to the time that you met in the field?
Tip of the hand.
In other words, did you choose to make a donation in this way to honor the day that you met?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Ah!
But I think we had conversations with Femi, the department chairman, that we wanted it to go for things that were having to do with being in lab, because that's where we met.
Right.
And made connections there.
So that brings me to the question that I gave you before we left, which is you have a strong marriage, married how many years?
46.
46 years. Any tips to the folks who are maybe just starting out?
Well, I live with a very creative guy, okay, who likes to do more than just, he's an avid reader, so there's books all over the house, all types. And he's very creative in that he also spends a lot of time with the grandchildren developing these art projects that I said, what are you doing? One of them involved using shaving cream. I said, well, you're not going to do that in the house, are you? And
marbling on ceramics by putting paint on top of shave cream. Try it. It's
okay.
Cool. Yeah.
It reminded me of that when I first met him in the lab. There was 3 of us in the lab, actually. The biggest thing that I noted in the other lab partner is that he was very, good at doing things, but left the place a mess. And we would always, complain. You got to clean up your section and whatever. So that's his creative part, and so I have to give him space. And
tolerate my messes.
Yeah, I have to tolerate. And what we did is just that we have a 3-bedroom house. I'm sorry. But we redid the downstairs, and that's kind of his space to go when he wants to create.
Yeah, and I hate to open up the door because she gets upset.
But and also he was very supportive with me in terms of after. I started teaching near Cortland County, and the first job I got was really I had chemistry, physics, and a couple of 2 electives, like some general courses. And
4 preps.
4 preps.
Right out of school.
Right. And the thing that was hard about it is that my predecessor left the place in shambles. There was no physics lab program. So I had to develop all of them myself. And sometimes I would see him on a weekend. I just would bring some for physics, like stuff that I could work on to create labs. So it made me, really appreciate, the creativity that goes into hands-on teaching, and I always felt that hands-on and giving those kids as much lab time as possible in addition to the course, to make the connection with whatever you're teaching at the time in lab, or do demos. And believe me, I did many, even the sodium and water, which I know they loved because it exploded. So so you have to make, and it would make the connection that they would like chemistry, because what upsets me the most is when I hear kids who maybe they're not ready for chemistry or physics yet, but they're put in there and they're just not quite ready, and then they don't like it because it's a struggle for them. And if maybe we waited another year for their brain to develop, what's the push? I mean, they're going to eventually go to college and take the courses again, most likely. So I've always tried to make it very hands-on and demos, and I just,
And we're doing that with our grandkids.
Yeah.
Our granddaughters. We have 4 granddaughters.
Right.
So.
I was going to ask, that's the second to last question.
Yeah.
How do you get children excited about science? You are grandparents, and I hear that that's the thing that makes you the happiest now, to talk about your kids. How do you approach them to interest them in science?
Well, don't give them the answer. Just let them play. I remember one of our granddaughters, Madeline, was actually adopted from a foster program, and so she was like over 4 years old when she first came. And so I would try to do these projects with her. I always had this vision of doing projects with my grandsons or daughters or something like that. And I remember I was trying to make something. I had all these colored cellophanes, and we were going to make like in a shoebox, you put a diorama in a shoebox with little animals and stuff like that. So I wanted to do that. But she's just like not even 5 years old, what she wanted to do is to cut out pieces of this colored cellophane and tape them to our patio and look at the interplay of the colors, of stacking them and stuff like that, and the manager of me wants to say, "Come on, Morgan, we got to finish this project." But then I'm just watching her, so how creative that her play is, and so I just let her to do that. And I have no idea. One of the things I'm proudest most about, that we're proudest most about, is our sons are wonderful fathers, and they married wonderful women that are terrific mothers as well. And I like to, though, and Morgan went to a summer program, and the counselor said that she is our most creative camper. And I like to think that the stuff that Andrea and I did with her might have had some small contribution to that, as well as her parents.
Wow, you're very proud, aren't you?
Oh, very proud.
And is that the best part about being retired now, is you can play with them whenever you want?
Yeah, and but you asked about what makes a good marriage and everything, and Andrea, nailed it on the tolerance. Which just takes a lot of tolerance for me. But the thing is that, and this is something I aspire to. I don't think I'm that great at it, but I'm working on it. Is that you may have a vigorous debate about something to do, a decision for the family, or this is an activity I want to do. You can have a debate about it, but once the decision's made, get all behind it, even if it's not necessarily your first choice, okay? Like, for example, one of the foolish things I do in my retirement is I have one of these gigantic Christmas light displays where I literally have miles of extension cords, tens of thousands of lights. I program music. I've got literally around 10,000 watts of stereos and a little FM station to put on a Christmas show on that. And Andrea let me do that.
I don't
but
think I had a choice.
Here's the thing: when January comes and the shutdown. She's out there in the blowing snow and cold, and January is hostile in Corning, New York. And she's out there helping me take down the things. I mean, it wasn't her first choice, but we made a decision that I'm going to let you do this silly little thing, but I'm going to support you, and I'm going to be out there helping you, even if there's something I'd be rather doing. So to me...
And those trees are getting taller, and I'm getting shorter, I think. To wrap them around them.
Maybe as you get older, you pay somebody to do that.
No, he likes doing it. He likes
the takedown part?
Well, not the
takedown. I have a system. The putting up the lights is fine. I start in October. But the last thing you have to do, you can't lay down the extension cords until the grass stops growing. So that means you're well into November. And I've actually had to dig up snow in order to lay the extension cords. So the extension cords isn't the fun part.
Last question. Oscar speech. If you won an award today and someone said, thank the people here at Oswego who made you what you are, who would you thank?
Oh, two, but far and above is Dr. Kenneth Hyde. He applied for and got a petroleum research fellowship, and that's how I was paid during the semester as well as for summer research. I mean, that really was a transformative. And also Professor Gus Silvera, who's the department chairman, and he was such a magnetic personality. I was just talking to him on the phone. Andrea and I had a conversation with him this summer. But I can't remember exactly what the word is, but charismatic,
Yeah, he cared about his students.
And he cared about his students, and he was a wonderful educator as well. And, and I learned so much, from him. For example, he would ask questions, sometimes really tough questions, of people in the audience, and if in the class. And organic chemistry was huge because it was all the biology majors, all the chemistry majors, and so there was maybe a couple hundred people in that. And he would pick you out and ask you a question. And if you got a right answer, it was like the most brilliant thing. And it just a little bit of praise to somebody like that is just so powerful. And I spent most of my career as a executive at Corning, and I learned that giving well-deserved praise generously is so motivating on that. It makes it a lot easier, to criticize as well when they know that when they've done a good thing that they're going to be. That's what I learned from him. But the entire faculty, and I get the sense it's the same thing here now, the faculty is really tight, so supportive of the students, and it was that way when Andrea and I were
definitely,
students as well.
Yeah, I was, with him, organic chemistry was tough for me. It was 8 o'clock in the morning, and I was like, wow, like it wasn't anything like the high school, because you don't get very much organic chemistry in high school. So, very first test, I probably did very poorly on it, so did a lot of other people. He says, don't worry, just come in and talk to me about, if you need some help on it. Very open, and I thought he would say to me, well, maybe you should drop the course. I mean, he could have sat back and said, well, you didn't do well on that, maybe you should just drop the course. But I didn't want to drop the course because I love chemistry. But I learned that I could get over that hump of that it didn't necessarily have to be an A and a B. It turned out to be a C, but a well-earned C, the hardest C I had to learn. And after that,
it meant something.
And it meant something, yeah. So I was proud of my C in chemistry, because a lot of people just would drop out or do something else, or change their major to an easier major. And he encouraged people not to do that. And that was a big difference. And he'd spend time in his office talking to you and helping you. You just would have to wait to see him sometimes because everybody else wanted to. But
could I just think one more story about Ken Hyde?
Absolutely.
And Ken, I was just starting out as this undergraduate research fellow working for him. And so I would come to the lab sometimes very early in the morning, like 7 o'clock in the morning, and start the experiments. In the beginning, I was a little bit of a klutz. I'm kind of a slow learner on that stuff. So one morning, and another alumnus, George Fairchild, and I hope he gets a chance to see this at point. So I'm in there, and I ended up dumping half a bottle of sulfuric acid on my blue jeans on that. And so, you're supposed to take off the jeans,
yes,
right? But I was at the sink, with the water running, and I was just like, dumping water on myself. And George came in, and George is a very wonderful guy, a lifelong friend. Came in and he said, "Pete, I think you ought to take those pants off," And so, George, I did. I got the acid off, and I'm sitting in the lab, wearing a lab coat with my bare legs hanging out. Ken Hyde comes in, and he was such a calm guy. And he just sat down on a bench, and he just kind of looked at me, and he just kind of shook his head and said, "Pete, I think I ought to do something." And he didn't say anything after that. He just walked out on that. And it was just like what was unsaid was saying, but I'm just going to let this play out and see what happens. And I think he was pretty pleased with the work once I got my feet. And I didn't dump acid in my blue jeans anymore.
And you stayed in touch with him throughout your career and came back and did guest speaking here at Oswego. That must have been so fulfilling.
Yeah, it was.
And he's just retired?
He's been retired for a while, and I gave a commencement address here a few years ago, and we got together and had a chance, and he inspired me to do Andrea's and my scholarship, because he did the same thing himself. He gave a major financial gift in order to support the summer research, because he had such good results with research scholars like myself and George Fairchild that inspired us, saying, well, let's do the same thing. So this wasn't necessarily our idea, it was Ken's idea.
But an idea that was well copied for a good reason.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for coming here. I really appreciated talking to the both of you. I love every time that I talk to other alumni, and I think I've done this maybe 15 times now. Everyone tends to say the same things, which is the humbleness of people, the approachableness of people on this campus, and the love they have for their alma mater. And I don't know if you guys ever ask other people who went to other colleges, but that's not normal.
Yeah, it's not.
It's not normal. So,
but the Penn State people come pretty close. But they're downright crazy.
Well, thank you again. Thank you again for just making the time for us. I really appreciate it, Pete and Andrea.
Our pleasure.
And
Thank
if
you,
you
Dee.
want to reach out to us, you can email us at alumni@oswego.edu. I'm Dee Perkins. We'll see you next time on the Oswego Alumni Podcast.